Hello, this is Jane, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the July 30 issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is from the front page. The title of it is Building Owner, City Exchange Trash Talk. Garbage Mess Leads to Clash with Neighbors Counselor. And this is by Ben Cohen. On windy days, the people on Church Street in the former municipality of York say they can see takeout containers sailing through the air, smell decomposing waste, and hear loose garbage bags scraping by as rats give chase. The wind blows it like a cannon, said resident Ihor Turjansky. I remember garbage coming right across the street. Cars had to stop. The source, he said, is a chronically overfilled garbage dump for a mid-rise apartment building next door. The space is partially enclosed by a fence, the perimeter of which is lined internally with plastic bins and externally with rat traps and burrows. The garbage issue here started more than a decade ago, according to Turjansky, who has lived next door for 42 years. This week, Council will vote on finding out whether it can punish the owner of the building in question in a novel way, blacklisting the property from city garbage collection services and forcing management to hire a private contractor better equipped to handle the situation. But a representative of the building denies there is a problem and says the campaign against the property is nothing more than a witch hunt by a local councilor. On Monday afternoon, many of the building's bins appeared cracked, unable to close properly and unable to contain the volume of waste stuffed into them. Tissues, food scraps, and other debris drifted around. This was a good day, according to Mark Linares, who has lived in the building for a year but is leaving next month. During his tenancy, he said he has seen many, many rats. Turjansky and his neighbors talk about the situation in the direst terms. It is horrific, they say, a nightmare that has been going on for a generation. It can be such a horrible mess that Turjansky's wife, Anne, who added the couple, planted a 10-foot shrub called a Chicago fire burning bush years ago to hide the horror. Area Councilor Frances Nunziata concurs. She said she has tried, unsuccessfully, for years to force the building to store its garbage more effectively, but she said the tools the city has aren't working. We had to send city staff there all the time to give them orders, said Nunziata. Of course, they didn't comply with any of them. They'll clean up, then a month later, 2 months later, it starts up again. Nunziata said she feels the 63-unit complex produces enough waste to warrant buying a large dumpster, which the city can collect from but doesn't provide. A representative of the building said the plastic bins currently being used seal tighter and are therefore cleaner. A dumpster might actually increase rodent infestations, he said. A smaller apartment building across the street has a metal dumpster. To the councilor's knowledge, the company that owns the building, Course Group Limited, has not been fined. The first draft of Nunziata's motion called for immediate action. If passed, it would have directed staff to discontinue city waste collection and require the owner to secure appropriate private commercial services. But the councilor amended this Tuesday after, she said, lawyers told her it would open the city up to a potential lawsuit. Now the revised text asks only that staff diligently review the situation to see if anything more can be done to ameliorate it, and report back next year with information on whether local laws could be amended to cut the building off from city garbage services. Nunziata's motion says the garbage problems at the building have persisted since 2013 and have progressively worsened over time. Leroy Bleda, who said he is counsel for Corse, firmly denied any issues with the garbage at the building. He said Nunziata was carrying out a vendetta against the building because it refuses to reconfigure its garbage dumping location to her liking, despite the fact that current setup is working well and any alternatives would be logistically challenging. The area is clean, he said. This is personal. It's politics. There's no truth to it. If there were truth to it, don't you think something would have been done? I've never had any complaints forwarded to me from any residents. This is completely false and exaggerated. Bleda said he had also received no notice that this motion was being drafted, which Nunziata confirmed. He said if the city does force Corse to seek private garbage pickup, the company will have to deal with the fallout from potential increased costs, which means it's possible rents will go up, he said. The counselor said she would fight the building on this if it tried to pass the costs on to renters. In addition to being the company's lawyer, Bleda said he is an officer with Corse, but said he does not own the company. Business registry files show he became president in 2014. Court documents show he began to manage Corse properties the same year after inheriting the company from his father. And there is a large photo accompanying this article, and it does not appear that they are making false allegations because it does show the garbage totes overflowing, stuff laid on the ground in front of it, more garbage in bags in front of it. The tops of the totes aren't closed and things are hanging out of there. And so it really does present an eyesore, but we'll have to see what happens there. The next article is also from the front page under the byline, Star Exclusive. Health Canada to alter sperm donation policy. Legal challenge said screening questions were discriminatory to gay, bisexual men. This is by Jacques Gallant. In what's being described as a big win for gay and bisexual men, Health Canada is planning to drop the remaining roadblock that prevented them from donating sperm. In the face of a 3-year-long legal challenge from a gay Toronto man who described Health Canada's policies as discriminatory and unconstitutional, the agency has confirmed that it will eliminate the remaining screening questions about sexual activity, which precluded some gay and bisexual men from donating. Those questions were the last vestige of what long used to be an explicit ban on sperm donations from men who have sex with men. In his legal challenge, Aziz M., whose last name is covered by a publication ban, had pointed out that all donors are already rigorously tested, including physical examination and disease screening, as well as infectious disease testing of the donor within 7 days of the donation and retesting of the donor once the donation has been quarantined for at least 180 days. Affidavits filed by experts in the proceedings confirmed the testing and quarantine procedures were already more than enough to protect against risk, including the transmission of HIV. A year after the challenge was filed, Health Canada announced in 2024 it would drop its ban on men who have had sex with men in the last 3 months from donating and asked all donors, regardless of gender, whether they had had anal sex with a new partner in the last 3 months. Aziz's lawyers, Gregory Coe and Frank Nasca, argued the agency effectively replaced the explicit ban with an implicit one. On Wednesday, Health Canada confirmed to the Star that it will drop the sex-based screening questions by the fall as it implements other requirements, including the mandatory use of what it described as advanced test kits for the detection of infectious diseases, including HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. The agency didn't provide details in its statement on the advanced test kits. Physicians who filed affidavits in the legal challenge said Health Canada's current testing methods are already sufficient. The Government of Canada is committed to making sure that sperm and ova donation policies are safe, non-discriminatory, and based on scientific evidence, said Health Canada spokesperson Karine LeBlanc. The decision came as a huge relief to Aziz. Now they're removing all explicit and implicit discrimination against gay and bisexual men, so I think it's a big win, he told the Star. Given the way sperm is tested and quarantined before it is used, at least for the last 2 decades, there was no need to discriminate against this group. Around 2014, when he was not the out and sexually active gay man he is now, Aziz began donating to a sperm bank. That decision blossomed into a long-lasting and meaningful relationship with a little girl born as a result of one of his donations. Aziz refers to her as his daughter in accordance with her parents' wishes. He only subsequently learned about the barriers gay and bisexual men faced in donating, which motivated him to bring the legal challenge. For me, it was the best decision I ever made in my whole life. It made my life much richer, Aziz said. Noting that there's a shortage of sperm donations in Canada, he said he hopes many of his friends who were previously barred from donating will now do so. And he also hopes to see changes to screening questions for other types of donations, including blood. Coe, one of his lawyers, described Health Canada's decision as heartening in the face of years-long legal battle. This decision, which is both sensible and mindful of the health considerations for stakeholders, is a step in the right direction and very encouraging for the community, Coe said. He expressed gratitude to a trio of experts with specialties including reproductive health and infectious diseases who confirmed in court filings there was no need for the screening questions to remain. I think it's what ultimately dislodged this decision from Health Canada, he said. It was an undeniable fact that the infectious diseases of concern would be caught by robust testing, quarantine, and retesting procedures in place. In her affidavit, Dr. Mona Lautfi, a longtime Toronto physician with expertise in HIV and reproductive medicine, said that Health Canada's current policy of retesting a donor after their sample had been quarantined for 180 days already was more than sufficient to account for a possible HIV infection. This approach, if anything, overcautious and is more than adequate to mitigate the risk of an undetected window period infection, wrote Lautfi, who leads the Women and HIV Research Program at Women's College Hospital. For these reasons, sexual activity-based screening questions could be eliminated altogether. Dr. Deborah Cohen, a California-based OBGYN specializing in reproductive infectious disease, concurred in her affidavit. The testing and quarantine procedures themselves are sufficient to detect HIV at a 100% accuracy level, she said. Accordingly, HIV testing is a far more reliable measure to mitigate the risk of disease transmission than donor screening questionnaires. And I need to pause at this moment to remind you you're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article, also off the front page, was under the byline Trade War. PM won't use oil exports as leverage against Trump. Ford suggests U.S. should feel, quote, pain, unquote, of tariff conflict. And this article is by Alex Bollingal. Ottawa. Prime Minister Mark Carney is pouring cold water on the idea of throttling oil exports to the United States as the trade war with Donald Trump drags on and his government stares down the imposition of a new round of steep American tariffs. Carney's reluctance to use U.S. reliance on Canadian energy as leverage in pursuit of a deal comes as opposition parties accuse him of caving to the Trump administration by sharing revenues from the Ottawa-financed Gordie Howe International Bridge and removing requirements for big American streaming companies to put money into funds for Canadian content. Premier Doug Ford is among those who have suggested Canada consider all options, including limiting oil, potash, and minerals exports so that the U.S. feels the pain of the trade conflict. Ford's call followed the White House's announcement last week that it would slap 50% tariffs on a range of Canadian goods on August 19, in part because of provincial boycotts of U.S. alcohol, Canadian protections in the dairy sector, and retaliatory tariffs in response to Trump's import duties on autos. The Prime Minister, who has previously said everything is on the table if Trump follows through with those tariffs, told reporters in Red Deer, Alta, on Wednesday that he doesn't, I think, is it Alberta? On Wednesday that he doesn't see a benefit for Canada in restricting exports of oil to the U.S. The federal government, which under Carney has removed or weakened national climate policies that the fossil fuel sector long opposed, is also working to build a major new oil pipeline to the west coast with Alberta, where Premier Danielle Smith has pushed back on proposals to limit energy exports to the U.S. in retaliation for Trump's tariffs. Being a reliable supplier is important. Canadians are reliable. Canadians can be trusted, Carney said. And so, when you're a supplier of a key commodity, a key service, you've got to think really hard about not supplying it, the Prime Minister added, before referring to the idea of blocking oil exports to the U.S. that were worth $130 billion in 2023 alone, according to the Canadian Energy Regulator. I mean, I can understand conceptually, but I don't see the value of it, Carney said. The Prime Minister also said any consideration of oil-rich Alberta's independence-themed referendum this fall also does not enter into the calculus of the federal government's trade strategy. With Cabinet Minister Dominic LeBlanc and lead trade negotiator Janice Charette in Washington this week to talk with American officials, Carney said the goal is to land a deal with a U.S. administration that now views tariffs as a key part of its economic policy. We're only going to accept a solution that works for Canadians, Carney said. We're going to focus now on building towards an agreement, if an agreement is possible. The Prime Minister also pushed back on allegations that his government is conceding too much to the U.S. as talks continue, repeating his claim that Canada has the best trade deal in the world right now, because about 85% of Canada's exports south of the border are tariff-free under the existing Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement. That's CUSMA. But on Parliament Hill, opposition parties tried to pursue a committee study of a deal the Liberal government struck with the U.S. to get Trump's approval to open the new Gordie Howe Bridge between Windsor and Detroit. After financing the $6.4 billion cost of the bridge, Canada agreed to share proceeds with an American Regional Development Fund, a decision Carney defended in part by saying it will result in less than $320 million going to the U.S. That's like buying a car from a neighbor who owns a dealership, paying cash for it, bringing it home, and then paying the neighbor every year because he finally agreed to give you the keys, said Conservative MP Harb Gill during the committee meeting. Carney also denied that a decision to remove a planned requirement for large online streaming companies like Netflix and Amazon to put 5% of their Canadian revenues into funds for Canadian content was linked to the trade war. Instead, the Prime Minister said it was motivated by a desire to ensure added costs of streaming don't get passed on to regular people. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet called it a gesture of weakness, while NDP MP Heather McPherson said the move is nothing more than an act of appeasement to placate Donald Trump and his tech billionaire supporters. Scotty Greenwood, a former U.S. diplomat who headed the Canadian-American Business Council for more than 20 years, said it is clear that relations between the two countries are, quote, tough right now, unquote, and suggested it could be time for Ottawa to find new levers to force a resolution to the trade war. Those could be through restricting exports of electricity, which many American states buy from Canada, or through mutually beneficial moves like accepting immigrants the U.S. doesn't want to keep. Canada's approach of be reasonable, be proportional, be measured sometimes serves it well. And sometimes you go, okay, it's time to drop the gloves, put up the dukes, and let's go, Greenwood said. This might be that time. The next article is under the byline of Billy Bishop. Chow fights to get land back. Council passes mayor's motion to demand repeal of airport law. And then the article has another headline inside, and it reads, Repeal Billy Bishop Law, City says. After heated debate, Council demands province scrap plan to take control of lands near airport. And this is by Modis Habibinia. Toronto City Council is demanding the repeal of the provincial law that gives Premier Doug Ford's government the power to take city land as part of its ill-fated plan to expand Billy Bishop Airport. Mayor Olivia Chow's motion to demand the repeal passed 25-1 at Council Wednesday, with the lone vote against being Councillor Stephen Holyday, Ward 2, Etobicoke Center. This is truly an important issue, Holyday said during the council debate. I think very plainly about the utility airports provide us as citizens, whether you fly or not. During the debate, Chow and Councillor Bradford for Ward 19 Beaches-East York, who's running to take her seat this October, had a heated back and forth about the airport expansion that resembled an exchange during a mayoral debate. I wanted to give you an opportunity to clear the air, Bradford said to Chow at one point. When did you learn, specifically from the province and the Port Authority, that they wanted to expand the island airport? He pointed to public records that show Chow's staff were lobbied by Newport Aviation, owners of the island airport terminal, before Ford formally announced his Jets vision in March. According to the lobbyist registry, several members of council were lobbied by Newport Aviation or its hired lobbyists, including Bradford's office and Chow's office, before Ford's announcement. There are no detailed descriptions in the registry of what these meetings, calls, or emails were about. Chow didn't answer the question the 3 times Bradford posed it. Instead, she asked Bradford about his own voting record. In October 2024, you led this council to say we need to expand that runway so we can allow jets. You voted for it, Chow said. Now I'm not sure where you stand. Which side are you on? To which Bradford quickly responded, let's not confuse the issue. You sound confused. What we were talking about in 2024 was the extension of the tripartite agreement, which I supported, adding that it was to allow for the construction of the federally mandated safety zones at the end of the runway. In an October 2024 council debate, 3 versions of the runway and safety areas were before council, which ended up voting for the smallest version. Bradford, who wanted the larger safety zones, voted against the smallest option. Advocates at the time said they worried the larger option would later mean a runway expansion, so the debate at council was seen by some as a proxy for the conversation over jets. However, Bradford maintained Wednesday that his vote was about safety. I'll clarify. You'll look at what happened in New York City when a fire truck smashed into the side of a landing aircraft. That's what I want to make sure we avoid in Toronto. Ahead of this week's final council meeting before the October 26th, municipal election, Chow insisted the waterfront belongs to the city and its residents, not Ford and his vision of an expanded island airport. The waterfront belongs to everyone, said Chow. The province can imagine whatever they want to and spend money doing whatever they want to, but for us, I say no, because people have spoken. On Tuesday, Provincial Transportation Minister Prabmeet Sarkaria said the province has no intention of repealing the law, which gives it the power to take ownership of certain waterfront land, including Little Norway Park, parts of the islands, and Hanlan's Point, as well as replace the city in the tripartite agreement governing Billy Bishop. Sarkaria also said the airport expansion was not dead, even though the federal government said last week it had decided to not pursue Ford's idea of a Billy Bishop expansion at this stage. Ottawa's public consultations showed 87% of the roughly 87,000 people who participated opposed any changes to the airport. As the Star revealed this week, Carney and Ford made an informal tit-for-tat deal, which they shook on in the Premier's Etobicoke home, involving Billy Bishop and Ottawa's Alto high-speed rail project, which Ford's MPPs are now criticizing. Asked if he thinks Ottawa will reverse course on the airport expansion in order to save Alto, Councillor Gord Perks from Parkdale High Park said he believes Toronto's MPs, which hold nearly every seat in the city, will have something to say. I can't remember a recent time when Torontonians mobilized so vociferously as they did on Billy Bishop Airport. That's not going away. Not now, not ever, Perks said. The next article is titled, first I have to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And as I was saying, the next article is titled, Mississauga Halts AI Data Centers. Council passes moratorium on projects for 1 year as staff study concerns. And this is by Kate Allen. Mississauga has become one of the first municipalities in Canada to approve a moratorium on AI data centers after Council voted unanimously Wednesday to initiate a pause of up to 1 year and potentially 2. The move will prohibit building major digital infrastructure facilities for up to 1 year while staff study concerns related to data centers, which are booming as demand for AI and cloud computing spikes. Staff also have the option of extending the moratorium for an extra year if they need more time. While some U.S. cities and states have restricted data center development as public opposition has rapidly increased, Mississauga is the first major Canadian city to do so after a similar motion failed in Hamilton this month. A rural municipality bordering Calgary, Rocky View County also recently enacted a moratorium. The Mississauga vote drew a large number of speakers, particularly young speakers, who overwhelmingly supported the freeze, citing concerns about data centers' enormous demand on the electrical grid, water use, noise levels, greenhouse gas emissions, and more. The motion was introduced by Ward 9 Councillor Martin Reed and seconded by Ward 10 Councillor Sue McFadden. A new large data center has been proposed at a site near Argentia Road and 10th Line, close to the border between the two wards. Wednesday's vote says we need to slow down and do it right, Reed said in an interview. The measure Council approved Wednesday, known as an interim control bylaw, is our only real tool as a municipality, Reed added. He credited a groundswell of support from Mississauga's young adults who are really leading the charge, noting that while some speakers said they supported data centers and Canadian data sovereignty generally, they have problems with the pace, the uncertainty, and the things like proximity, noise, energy, and water not being fully articulated before making a decision. It was really a question of due diligence. A representative from Prologis, the company that has applied to rezone the Ward 9 site in order to build the 2-story data center, told councillors that Prologis was very likely to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal if the pause was approved. Prologis had said they would not appeal if the city instead continued with a staff study of data centers due later this year. Mayor Carolyn Parrish, who did not vote on the motion Wednesday, expressed reservations about ignoring the advice of staff, who favored the study over the full freeze, and about impacts on businesses and the tax revenue the center brings to the city. But she added that I sympathize 100% with residents' uncertainty and fear of the unknown. We don't know what data centers are going to do to our communities, she said. Reed acknowledged Parrish was correct about the foregone tax revenue, but emphasized that the new measure is a pause, not a permanent halt. Council must vote again at the next regular council meeting, which is due in 3 weeks, to approve the final text of the interim control bylaw. Reed said he expected that vote to pass easily given Wednesday's outcome. The next article is titled Former MP Alexander is, quote, unfit, unquote, to be mayor, Bradford charges. New entry into race could divide votes on the center right, and this is by Ben Spur. Unfit for office, a spoiler, a kamikaze candidate. Those were among the opening salvos Toronto mayoral hopeful Brad Bradford and his team lobbed Wednesday at Chris Alexander as he signed up to become the latest high-profile challenger for Toronto's top job. Alexander hadn't even filed his nomination papers on Wednesday morning when Bradford took aim at the former Conservative MP, whose fledgling campaign is seen as a serious threat to his own because it has the potential to split the center-right vote. Speaking to reporters at City Hall, Bradford, the councillor for Beaches-East York, asserted that until rumors began circulating about Alexander's potential run, he had never heard of him. Alexander was MP for Pickering-Ajax from 2011 to 2015 and served as immigration minister under Prime Minister Stephen Harper from 2013 to 2015. I've never seen him in my life. I don't think he's ever stepped foot in this building before. I've never talked to him. I literally didn't know who he was, Bradford said. The counselor added that what he has since learned about Alexander is, quote, concerning, unquote. He cited Alexander's support while immigration minister for the Tories' notorious 2015 election proposal for a barbaric cultural practices hotline, as well as a backlash Alexander faced in 2016 for failing to silence a crowd that chanted, "Lock her up," about Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. The hotline proposal had been deeply hurtful to many residents, particularly the Muslim community, Bradford said, and in the most diverse city in the world, somebody who harbors those views, I think that makes you unfit for this office. Alexander's entrance into the mayor's race has the potential to dramatically alter the campaign. Until he announced his intention to run, Bradford appeared to have successfully positioned himself as the only serious challenger to progressive incumbent Olivia Chow in the October 26 contest. With at least two candidates running to the right of her competing for similarly aligned voters, the mayor could have a better chance of victory. Even as Bradford publicly attempted to frame the election as still being a two-person fight, The choice is very clear between myself and Mayor Chow, he told reporters. Behind the scenes, his campaign team was frank about the danger Alexander's run poses. A vote for a spoiler candidate like Chris is a vote for Olivia Chow, Bradford's campaign co-chair Mike Van Soelen wrote in an email to supporters, which was shared with the Star. He called Alexander's candidacy a gift basket delivered to the mayor's office. Bradford advisor Warren Kinsella used more colorful language. Chris Alexander is a kamikaze candidate, he wrote in a post to X that was later deleted. Speaking to reporters after walking into City Hall with his wife and 3 children to submit his nomination, Alexander appeared surprised by Bradford's attacks. "Wow, hadn't heard that," he said when told that the counselor had called him unfit for the mayor's job. In what is already becoming his familiar refrain when asked about the cultural practices tip line, Alexander said he wanted to be judged by his whole record, which he asserted was more accomplished than the other candidates and included overseeing Canada's immigration system and leading the UN's political mission to Afghanistan. He told the Star on Tuesday the hotline idea was a mistake that he had expressed regret for. Although the mayor's race is his first entry into city politics, Alexander said his experience as a diplomat and problem solver is relevant. "I think it's going to take an outsider, to be honest, someone who hasn't been on council, to get this city back on track," he said. His campaign website lists improving transit, making housing more affordable, and restarting Toronto's economic engine as priorities. As for the notion that he should have stayed out of the race to give Bradford a clear shot at unseating Chow, Alexander said the votes of Torontonians are not a pie to be split up by strategists sitting behind closed doors somewhere, and argued that candidates have to earn votes by presenting ideas that resonate with residents. "That's the only way to do this," he said. Chow, who was an NDP MP for Trinity Spadina when Alexander was in Parliament, declined to weigh in on his candidacy. At a press conference ahead of Wednesday's council meeting, Chow gave a campaign-style speech about her accomplishments while flanked by more than a dozen council members. But she said the election is still 3 months away and she's focused on city business. She has said she won't start formally campaigning until September. Nominations for the election close on August 21. And the next article is right next to that one, and the title is "Former Hamilton MPP Enters By-Election" by Rob Ferguson. It's comeback time for former New Democrat MPP Monique Taylor, who left provincial politics a year ago to run federally and lost. She will be the NDP candidate in a looming Hamilton East Stony Creek by-election to replace Premier Doug Ford's retiring sport minister Neil Lumsden. He wrestled the riding from New Democrats in 2022. Taylor said the former CFL star's decision to step down effective next Tuesday opened a door for her to return to Queen's Park, with Ford's progressive conservatives under pressure over his $28.9 million gravy plane jet purchase and expense scandals. "There was absolutely no question for me of what I needed to do," Taylor said in an interview Wednesday, noting she was born and raised in Hamilton East Stony Creek, where she also raised her daughter. Ford is out there just blowing millions of dollars on the luxury jet and his ministers are eating in five-star restaurants and lavish hotels. That's not what people expect from their government. Taylor represented nearby Hamilton Mountain in the legislature from 2011 to 2025. She decided not to run again and won the federal NDP nomination, but placed third in last year's federal election. She will be acclaimed the candidate at a meeting of the NDP Riding Association on Friday. Ford is expected to call the by-election next Wednesday for September 3rd, along with by-elections in Scarborough Southwest to replace former New Democrat MPP Dolly Begum, now the area's federal Liberal MP, and Ford's former Treasury Board President Caroline Mulroney in York Simcoe. And I need to pause here one last time to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next article is titled, PCs Speak Out Against Alto Rail Project. Eastern Ontario MPPs critical of PM's high-speed line proposal after Ottawa blocks airport plan. This is by Robert Benzie and Ryan Tumilty. Stung by Prime Minister Mark Carney's rethink on Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport, Premier Doug Ford's progressive conservatives are now expressing doubts about Ottawa's Alto high-speed rail scheme. In a transportation mega project tit for tat, 11 Tory MPPs have issued a statement critical of Carney's proposed rail line connecting Toronto to Quebec City. While the federal government has the power to railroad through Alto, regardless of whether Queen's Park approves of any land expropriation, the MPP's intervention is more than symbolic. As first disclosed by the Star on Monday, the two major infrastructure plans are linked in an informal deal between Carney and Ford. It's Billy Bishop for Alto. That was always the understanding, said a senior Ontario official who spoke confidentially in order to discuss internal deliberations. The proposed 300-kilometer /H train that would cut through farmland in rural ridings represented by Tory MPPs has always been unpopular with some members of Ford's caucus. But because the Premier supported Carney's high-speed rail plan in exchange for the tacit federal backing of the Billy Bishop expansion, the two leaders shook hands on it at Ford's Etobicoke home. The MPPs largely kept their concerns to themselves until now. On Tuesday night, in a statement first reported by CBC, the Eastern Ontario PC caucus warned that investments that strengthen Ontario's economy, improve transportation, and create jobs need to reflect the priorities and needs of rural communities, farmers, families, and local businesses. Public confidence in major infrastructure projects depends on meaningful consultation. In the case of Alto, too many questions remain unanswered. Too many voices have been ignored, the MPPs said. If Alto is to proceed, local voices impacted by this project deserve to see their feedback reflected in the project's planning, route selection, and delivery. The federal government must ensure that any potential future rail project minimizes impact on farmland and is supported by the people affected. We will continue to stand with our municipalities, farmers, landowners, and residents. But the senior Ontario official said the MPP's statement should be the extent of the province's actions aimed at Ottawa. For now, the 11 MPPs are Labour Minister David Passini, Colleges and Universities Minister Nolan Quinn, Government House Leader Steve Clark, and backbenchers Tyler Alsop, Rick Bresee, George Darrouz, Billy Denault, John Jordan, Stephane Sarrazin, Lori Scott, and Dave Smith. Their salvo comes after Federal Transportation Minister Stephen McKinnon stunned the province Friday night by announcing changes to the island airport would be limited to previously planned safety improvements and not to extend the runway to allow commuter jets. In a blow to Ford, Ottawa acted within hours of receiving results of an online public consultation that found 87% of 87,000 respondents opposed the idea of the expanded Billy Bishop. And I already read that part in another article. So the federal Liberals' action came before Carney called 3 key by-elections on Sunday for August 31, including in the lakefront constituencies of Beaches and East York. Liberal MPs who represent 23 of Toronto's 24 federal ridings have been taking heat for the airport push for months, thanks to organized campaign by opponents concerned about noise, pollution, gridlock, and environmental effects. McKinnon noted Wednesday the ALTO project would help many of the people the Tory MPPs represent. A vast majority of residents in eastern Ontario would be literally minutes away from the rail network broadly or an ALTO station, he said in Montreal, where he announced nearly $2 billion to purchase new locomotives for the existing Via Rail fleet, which would remain in service even if ALTO is launched. The federal minister said he was confident the concerns being raised about the high-speed rail line would be addressed. Against the backdrop of current tensions, McKinnon insisted relations between Ottawa and Queen's Park remain strong despite any disagreements. I have, personally speaking, a lot of affection for and great collaboration with my counterpart, Minister Pravmeet Sarkaria, he said of the provincial transportation minister. The government has extraordinary cooperation on a number of very, very important economic projects with Mr. Ford's government that will continue. The Star has confirmed that a federal feasibility study into the proposed expansion of Billy Bishop is continuing and will be completed this fall. Federal sources, speaking confidentially because they weren't authorized to discuss the issue publicly, say a smaller island airfield expansion could still be possible if it addresses local concerns and complements plans to expand Pearson Airport and the ALTO project. The next article is titled U.S. Men Guilty in Caribbean Murders of 2 Canadians. Defendant's lawyer has filed an appeal of jury's decision. This is by Jason Miller. 2 men charged in the murder of Canadian computer animation pioneer Daniel Langlois and his partner Dominique Marchand in the Caribbean island nation of Dominica were found guilty of murder Tuesday. American entrepreneur Jonathan Layer and fellow American Robert Snyder Jr. were both found guilty of murder by a jury in the High Court of Justice in Roseau, the capital city, said Ravi Rajkumar, who represented both men at trial. The guilty verdict was returned after 2 hours of deliberation following a trial that ran for 4 weeks and featured more than 40 witnesses, Rajkumar said. We filed an appeal yesterday against the decision of the jury, Rajkumar said. He said that the Court of Appeal will review the entire trial process as well as the comments of the judges summing up to see whether there was a miscarriage of justice or any errors of law. Langlois and Marchand were found dead in a burnout SUV not far from the mountaintop resort they owned on the island on December 1, 2023. The same day, Lehrer and Snyder Jr. were arrested. Langlois and Marchand had built a 285-acre, 14-suite eco resort that opened in 2022 after years of development. Lehrer oversaw a historic cocoa plantation next door. Prior to the killings, Langlois and Lehrer had been locked in a protracted legal battle over the use of a road known as the Morne Rouge Public Road that connects their properties, according to court records. The road crossed through the Lehrer estate, sparking the conflict. The Dominica police force said that Langlois, 66, and Marchand, 58, were likely ambushed on a remote trail near Soufriere as they returned to their upscale resort. Police said the couple's Nissan X-Trail had been riddled with bullets before it was set on fire, with Langlois and Marchand inside on November 30, 2023. Langlois made his fortune in the 1990s selling his Montreal-based company Softimage, which produced software used in Hollywood blockbusters. He and Marchand moved to Dominica in 1997. Lehrer had previously told the Star through his lawyers and spokesperson that he had hired Snyder to be the property manager of the cocoa plantation. Snyder's job was to service the business's vehicles and heavy machinery. Both men pleaded not guilty and will remain in custody until a date is set for sentencing. Rajkumar said the list of witnesses called at trial included employees of both Lehrer and Langlois, along with chief police investigators in the case. The maximum penalty for murder in Dominica is the death penalty, but Rajkumar said the director of public prosecutions did not give an undertaking that she was not going to seek the death penalty in this matter. He said the men faced the prospect of living out the rest of their lives behind bars. He said the case attracted much public attention on the island because it was a horrendous act. They were burnt beyond recognition, not the kind of murder you would normally see in a country like Dominica, Rajkumar said. And I need to end here now with you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 30 issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Jane. Thank you for listening.